다른데 되는데 배가 참을로야 나루들이 섬주샤 다 접지도 안다들인 쇼베 차려 가자 로종기 츠게메 다들마 모티니가 샤도스니
I would like to greet all of you who have come here this morning. Good morning to all. And during this morning's session, we will continue our exploration of the text known as the 8 verses for training the mind, which we began looking at yesterday.
다데라야 저데 쇼로가 시바디 그가 쇼로가 시바디 버도르스레 드레르 쮸람군도 봐
Sorry.
쮸람군도 인기 말해
Rangshing mesemjenam.
아네 런싱에 베심제남 디두 차베 는 통제 렌첸데다 차바다
Nieparkawe.
Nieparkawe 진진 쇼스 다 디기 노래 다 디제
Lasso. Specifically, the place where we left our discussion yesterday was that we were discussing the 4th verse. Whenever I see beings of ill character, weighed down by harsh misdeeds and suffering, as if I had discovered a treasury of precious jewels, may I cherish them as something difficult to find.
Here we're talking about cherishing 3 different types of people. People with very bad characters, people who are weighed down by the severe misdeeds, and people who are weighed down by severe suffering. 다들이 인주산에 드리지기다 가시지 가사 림바 숨을 다치 가서 민다바 숨시에 인주산에 다 당보디 bad characters and 다도 정신에 베심제 사드레 데급리아 정신에 바슬라고야 데 가르스나 지베미 horrible 노지바 아다는 신기 그즈 지베 녀모 쇼타고 싶지에 버체 쇼타고 싶지에 버체네 그 관수지 지수수기 control 채토야 맹게 control 매바 안드레인두산 도스지 셈디 녀모게베 된지 녀네 세나다도 녀모베 다지 녀버도 차제 다지 정대야지 슈첨부를 시험 아니 지금 유니지 나게 사고 야나 시단 사고 야나 지 차도 사고 다들 지리 바지 고쳐오면도 삼천도
Lasso. The practice associated with this verse entails relating to 3 different kinds of people, as His Holiness said. People with very bad character or a very ill character, people who are weighed down by severe misdeeds, and people who are experiencing extreme forms of suffering. So as to the first type of individual, those of ill character, this refers essentially to what we would normally think of as simply horrible people. It refers to people whose minds are completely overpowered by very strong, disturbing emotions, and who, as a result of that, have no self-control whatsoever. Their minds are incapacitated by their own disturbing emotions. And so these types of individuals can variously be overcome by strong pride or arrogance, strong aggression, or strong jealousy, and so on.
That these sort of the me, family members, that the day now, I just some of the twine me, be lung, Sava summer, but Lamsang, Contras Harbor today, you ever. And Cassia, Namgu miss Sambo Yebi now. Yaji chang of Arab in the Tungje. Yan the Jake Gensiane, Yanji me, Chicarodaji, Ransing, Yambar Chandler. That the day on water. And Dana seen some azu lamro shira majuna anaja lama dinjaya tesya ji jidan lama yakbo yimche yina ji lama ya 참 가시 시간에 맞는 도와
lao
ji lama 냠네 딱 가서 다시 캔사르지 다 냠네 메스 유에스나는 시간에 맞게 갈아 가버지 딱 간다지 Pena lama marpan robuji chasana.
lasa
Hong Chundu ne shiga de desji shenda minraji shiba shiga zuburu yusare. Chezan kongi fathers samar kongi abati be simde chongji. Tandi nge pudi yana nimajila kwe mi shenda sea mi shenshi sea ki nyanga dos. Yana mi shenshi ki Nye Pundi Sea, Nyangados. The Shika Zubudu Jebta.
lasa
Tana Shinki, Millerebe, Namtaranalola, Azun, Tayundusane, that Marbaki intention in and intention mean and the Taka Shika Zubudu Jebta.
lasa
Namgur the Jebta Tongorwa. Tang Azul Marbe sort of Tuina, and Pachi Ba Nazu. Paji sogom che tu marwa ta de ji except che tu mara sam cha do
lasa
kada den da de aju nam gyu mi zin na lo le kura thwa yu de bin je yung go alles
lasa And sometimes we encounter family members who fit into this category of those who are very ill-natured. So sometimes we witness our family members behaving in erratic ways, becoming extremely irritable, angry, and so forth. Even if they are a good person most of the time, sometimes we see them in their worst states when they are overpowered by very destructive emotions. And this can become amplified if certain conditions trigger emotional outbursts or outburst of destructive emotions, conditions such as alcohol and so forth. So we encounter these types of situations with various people. And sometimes we even encounter such situations with spiritual teachers. We may be aware of certain spiritual teachers who are not completely bad people. You can't say that they have no Dharma practice at all, because they clearly do and in many ways can be an excellent teacher. But on the other hand, as we get to know them, we may see that they have certain issues with their personalities that are very problematic. To give a historical example, we could look at the great master Marpa from the Kagyu lineage. He is someone who we could say had some issues with his personality. From the time he was small, his father was very worried about him because he immediately recognized that he had a very rough personality, a rough character. And his father thought to himself, this child of mine has really a rough streak. And it's so bad that I'm really afraid that either he's going to end up killing someone or get killed by someone. In the same way, we can see evidence of Marpa's personality traits surfacing in the life story of Milarepa. Whether it was intentional or not on the part of Marpa, he certainly displayed some outward behaviors that were very rough. And I think that if we were being honest with ourselves, we would have to say that we wouldn't be able to tolerate that if we were in Milarepa's shoes. So, in any case, we do encounter beings with these various types of traits in our lives.
And the next type of people, person, somebody that's nibadi, kansa nibadi, that's a cherishing, jebber, zingwagi, kansa nibadi, rigdi candidates, that is be lega, severe misdeeds, so my that's be lega doja should share.
Listen.
That the pena quirky na neba chamber should son. Better to miton ramabo. Sevam Yana Jig Kashre. That's it in sound of Simmons and the chick. Takanda she bombed with the gives her, the day tone, and that she Kashra she miss Abba that Gunor, la mid the Gunor so Mambush, Torchum Cheva. That did which day, Mazutin, that Zumling Tolia, Casakalia, Mamuton the Yare. That the interview Cansatilia, see you.
Lazo? The second category of individuals who we are instructed and encouraged to cherish by this verse is those who have committed severe misdeeds. So an example of this type of individual is one who has committed very serious crimes. It could be someone who has killed many people, perhaps even multiple thousands of people. Of course, in our modern times, we are aware of many different acts of violent extremism, using explosives to take life on a massive scale or to cause massive destruction, and so on.
다들이 주상 아주기 미 가사 디질량 아주베 타 니버치 대비미나 다 지 고즈기 베 심규리아 베데 가르지기 다지 베지 콩르레 다는 근진 다 뇌심 다는 신지 차도 나서 같은这个배 킹이 여 되지 미지 안에 디니 킹 여버 좀더 마세비 딘제게 다지 녀몽배 왕도 손에 그런 게 지금 자와치하다 참으로 녀몽배 왕도 손에 안에 다시 배대 가지고 배대 녀몽배 킹 가지고 배 가지고 overwhelmed somewhere 지금 딘을 차대야지 다 되게 인도스탄에 다 디스어로 디줄이야 다 간다 아주 지 제벌 준비 유암 닌지유 지 차대요레스
Lasso? If we look closely at the realities of these individuals, we will see that their hearts and minds are completely filled with destructive emotions, such as anger, resentment, malicious intent, and jealousy. And their minds completely overpowered by these negative emotions motivate their destructive actions. So rather than being under their own control, these individuals are completely under the control of very destructive emotions. And for this reason, we are encouraged to cherish them as objects of our compassion.
다드네 타마디 가지고 이제 동해 차변인데 봐. 다드네 심제는 사드래. 다 동해 차변인데 사데. 지신 가사 신배나 지배 나사. 배지 가지고 이제 숙차고. 다지 진짜게 나르체 여대 봐. 드린 삼성 가서 지기 신 나서 동해 차변인데 봐. 통주산에 제가 지금 통년 만들듯이 그래서 다들 통일에서 셈리아 지 가서다 디스터브스나 다도 간다지 셈라 마데와 쉬우지 용기에 빈두사나 디균전에 된 마데와 와지 다나 신다 지 소소레 지지 니제 매대버지 근데 지금 초안듯이 용기에 빈두사나 아주 지금 통년 만들듯이 딜레베 유엔에 대하지 아주 다들 지금 남주들이 세대가 와래. 다만 신기 라바르도지 수수기 지금 초본으로 아니 수수기 지 패밀리 멤버도 다든데 내 나서 나라한테 통도사 라바르도지 가르쳐야다 지 초직네 대래야 직제신 방배기 사바직 쉬우셔 보시야지 대 지금 다이네 지진 디제로 보시라면 주사네 아직 좀 동해 용한데 알아. 난 참섬 다 동해 지 쇠다 매버 차연 주사네 다 텔리 유야 마도지 신 특히 매대로 되게 용어하는.
The final category of individuals that is raised here is those who are weighed down by extreme forms of suffering. So this can include individuals who are facing very serious and painful illnesses. Our normal reaction to seeing the suffering of these individuals is to dissociate. Our minds want to avoid bearing witness to their suffering because their suffering is so overwhelming to us. And because we don't know how to hold our minds in response to seeing that suffering. We don't know precisely what to think or what we should do. So, at some level, of our being, we make the decision to try to avoid bearing witness to that suffering. And the same reaction can even happen when this severe illness occurs in our own family. On the one hand, we feel great compassion and closeness to the family member who is afflicted by the illness, but on the other hand, we feel powerless. Because the suffering is so severe, we don't know what to think or do. And so instead of remaining in a place of compassion, our mind begins to try to avoid the situation, to avoid the awareness of that severe suffering.
아들이 인도스탄 내려야 조 시아 송한데 아주 가주래 셴드윈 체베 내걸이야 심제 망부지 당 아주 잡아 연구래 connection making connection 연구래 다 심제 다이네 디나네 지 가주래 배나人性也被심제 한다 이제 미 강사 가시 배 내가 두자 시비들 체셔 봐 다들 요데 봐다 양 가시 지 동해 작업에 뇌인데 저기 심제에 통주사나 다 되게 될이야 아주 여기 제가 샤베 내걸이야 에너지 아주리아 스템리아 다시 로리아 종다른 잡지 산한다도 트레이닝 좀 매비비나 안 되게들이야 가셔다지 good connections 산한다도 간다 지 to face some of those kind of people some of that 바지 깔아가버 차리아르스 드링이 뒤교제 되는 겁들이야 미세도 안에 다들 강사가 숨디 바지 송이부터
So basically, our instinctive reaction in many cases when witnessing or coming into connection with any three of these types of individuals is to try to avoid them or try to avoid the situation in some way or another. Therefore, this verse was taught because on the Bodhisattva path, when we endeavor to benefit others, we will make connection with a great many sentient beings and all different types of sentient beings. From among these connections, some of them will be with sentient beings who are who have very bad character. Some connections will be with sentient beings who have performed or are performing serious negative actions. And some connections will be with sentient beings who are weighed down by severe illness. If we don't have some type of training or habit of training already present in our minds when we come into relationship with these beings, then it will be difficult for us to make a good connection with them and for us to truly face their situation. That's why the trainings of this fourth verse are taught here, so that we can begin to train our minds, so that we will be able to face these situations properly.
compassion, cherishing, 다는 신기지 compassion 슬라유 인도스탄에 다디 개침부지 가르쳐도 가르쳐나 지 닌제세 유디하다 닌징게 강사딩이 버루려야 지가르에 파타스는 당도 타르디 배 진용도 당 타의 치통도 당과지 드레인 비싼다 닌젠겐 생계지 배 니주 그란디 good situation of 나 유업체 닌제세 유이데 bad situation of 나 유업체 든든도 지마인 봐 든든게 다가서지 닌젠겐다 닌제세 유이데 배 타대도 다 내지 맞아봐 다 런이 닌젠겐 가사 런이 닌제세 유이데 교밤 다지 디기 코사텔이야 아니 퍼버러지 근데 그 상담한테 드리지가 돈 딱한다 가지고 but fully sort of accept senadando 야나지 involvement 드리지 과데 개접시라 차대요 대마도베 당기 니 베나 가사 숨부딜이야 아주 진 대바 체외걸이야 그뒤에 다지 아주 지 김전으로 지 가서다 그뒤에 excuse를 지 라체 이제 avoid 차지 용으로 이내 내 excuse 망아지 바지 란드다 잡아야 되지 바지 쳐야 하는 something 그래서 당아 ngal matewa yongodo pena ji yana ngal matewa yongodo yana ji disturb jingye ji 가서 rani le matewa yongoyo bichida yana ji rani ki 가서 동된데 메바 tin데 균세 조 tin데 랑데 균세 데네 avoid 차지 바지 용고로 마도비 균세 양다라 데네 avoid 차지 바지 가라하고래 아주 다시 재비입니다. 디균전 때는 랑다 생기 타데 진용 담입니다. 아니 지 selfish 디 가서 selfish 가서 excuse nyoro 주고 됐습니다.
Lasso? It is important for us to cherish beings who fit into these categories because the trainings in compassion overall are all about shortening the distance between ourselves as generators of compassion and the sentient beings who are the objects of our compassion. When we cultivate compassion, we want to avoid having an attitude that thinks that our situation is good and the situation of those for whom we are feeling compassion is bad. Rather than thinking that way, we regard the one who feels compassion and the object of the compassion as not separate from each other, not different. In fact, when we engender true compassion, then that compassion is a situation where we become the object of our compassion. A situation where we actually transfer ourselves into the situation of the sentient beings for whom we feel compassion. In that way, we fully accept their situation and their suffering. And our compassion is a compassion of full involvement. This is a very important point to train in. If we don't train in this way, then we will always come up with excuses not to become intimately familiar with the sufferings of these three types of individual. And we will find that most of our excuses are in some way connected to the mind of self-centeredness. We say to ourselves, I'm uncomfortable with relating to this suffering, with relating to this individual. It makes me upset. I don't want to face it, and so forth. But I think if we really analyze those excuses well, we will see that these excuses are not authentic reasons for us to avoid dealing with those sentient beings suffering. When we examine our mind and train in this way, it will help those types of selfish excuses diminish further and further.
Okay. 주주. 그래. 12 o'clock until what? Wow.
주님, 제가
12:30. 다 바지 드립식 두면로 다 드네 쇼로가 쉬어대요.
라서
쇼로가 쉬어들이야. 가래래.
나봐
다라 신기 차도기. 네.
라리 시골 라서 미리
시골라서 미리비 경가랑가 량바다 개가 신라 묘셔.
라서. That completes our discussion of the meaning of the fourth verse. Verse number 5 says, when others, out of jealousy, scold, insult, and treat me in other unreasonable ways, may I take such defeat upon myself and offer victory to others.
다디 데스가라가wen로 지당기 고랑 가르쳐지 남규영아 저기 지 현기 지 시와도 군립 체발라서 근데 니주 총백급이야 아주 그뒤네 지 가르쳐야 데 두주망고질이야 지 이제 기베 교연당 배직 되게 상물로 미신다질이야 지 쭉쭉 쳐져지제 내려와 봐. 근데 이 비슷하네. 미신다게 pointing their fingers to you and rangi pointing your fingers to someone else. The understand yes means kursöbare sarabchikda. 야나지 규인 규제 신다질 때는 충분해 sarabchik. 마다베 수수기 gyöngyi bachik accept chas and rando yana ji susul kanangdo gorche and di gyöngdi kandes chungmare cheche and ji samlu lulu doaji baji yunggo mare azu so emotional chache kaduine ji 어떤 알 gyömes kaduine zugu yarabchi kachila gorche zugu yaji kaduine bajidir chedeyo.
The practice taught by this verse is a bit of a challenging practice. Usually, when we are scolded or insulted by others, we're not able to take the blame that they cast toward us. When it comes to assigning blame or fault, the usual habit is that others point their fingers at us, and then we begin pointing our finger at others. It's very difficult in any situation for us to accept that something is our fault or due to a problem or flaw on our side. We're not able to turn our attention inwards and direct it at ourselves because we're so overwhelmed by the emotions of the moment. And so instead we resort to turning our attention outward and pointing our fingers outward.
인주산다 겁들이야 경가랑게 렘바 걔가 시안을 비와사데 다 가담베게 치 남규 가담 이 지가로야 명아드 주나 용대야 치 개침을 차대요.
Lassa? Therefore, to counteract this habit, we are encouraged by this verse to take defeat upon ourselves and offer victory to others. This phrase is a very important phrase that occurs in the key instructions of the Kadampa tradition over and over again. Taking defeat upon oneself, offering victory to others.
디츠디 게라심의 인상 미상매디 과이는 배주당디가래 참선 misused of the day 빠지치가다 지
Lassa?
드린주산 답변아 미신다지 컴퓨터로 답이오나 지 개가 시행을 미고래 그 판가랑가 랭고래 그냥 컴퓨터 판바
Lassa? Lassa?
근데 주가로 대배지 칙랑가 돈에 봐 전다랑 삼로 마다지 칙고랑 돈에 봐 미망부지기 칙지부로 삼다데 같이 용디
Lassa? Come to send a lawsuit.
나
Lassa? However, sometimes, since this instruction is so famous and is repeated over and over again, sometimes its meaning is lost. And people focus too much on the words themselves. For example, if someone were to be sued in a court of law, and familiar with this instruction from the Kadam tradition of offering victory to others and taking defeat upon oneself, one might be tempted to just simply follow the literal meaning of that instruction and give up one's case immediately and let the other side win the lawsuit. But that type of approach is too literal of an interpretation of this instruction.
다 얘가 시행을 비판과랑 내사데 조디 드가스 미신달이야 지 개가때 소소 판관녀 대대나 나 되게 미세지 가수라다지 로종 전주 쌤정아 거즈 팬더에 하고만 와
Lassa?
소소지 감주 배 망보지 소소기 배 판관녀에 되네 전주 쌤 이야기로 갈라가보러
Lassa?
다 조조디 감들이야 가수라다지 칸 난도 거시 배지 견의 생기 견단지 지 윤조로 체지 소소 마제바지 체버에서 윤조로 체데 체버거들이야 지 소소 쌤데 이모셔널 마찬가지 오늘 셰비나 소소기 논주디 체면나 소소 건도사과 요마로 오늘 체나
Lassa?
다이네 지 생기 많이 봐 줘요 누산 되기 조 다지 수수 세마대 용대요래 제가 근데 그 마대버디스 매버치 신경에 칸낭도 거시
Lassa?
안다지 수수기 가르다지 같이다 경야 맞지 칸낭도 거지 수수기 내단 감지인 것들이야 수수기 investigation로 차다 안다지 삼로 흘려자 다 되게지면 계시 미신기 윤주 전에 소소 다시 마대와다 셈 축번을 차비는 아니 바지다 가르에 네 오케이 다 딩문에 전에잖아 디기 가르다 다디 어라다 게 신나들
Lasso? Come to say a tick the Tim Kang Gejawala.
팀강기 제래
Lasso.
당하라니 금주 개음인다야
Lasso.
팀강기 제래 팀강 안안 줘래 대단도 하마네
Lasso. The true intent behind the instruction or encouragement to give victory to others and take defeat upon oneself isn't just to simply follow some type of outward shape of one's behavior. If one were to simply allow oneself to be defeated in every situation and think that one was training in bodhicitta by doing so, then that would be a mistake. To allow others to always prevail over oneself, just for the sake of allowing them to prevail, and accepting defeat for oneself just for the sake of accepting defeat. If you took that approach, it's not very clear how much bodhicitta would develop within your mind stream. It would be difficult to cause bodhicitta to increase within one's mind stream just by behaving in that way. The deeper intent behind this instruction is to direct our attention inwards whenever we are blamed for something. So even if we have done nothing wrong and are not at fault at all, and someone still blames us, we can relax and simply direct our attention inward. Sometimes what happens is that if we have done nothing wrong, yet someone blames us for something, we'd immediately become angry and want to fight back with them. But the instruction we're encouraged to adopt here is one in which we simply relax and direct our attention inward. Having relaxed and directed our attention inward, we can then look carefully at our own situation on the inside and then respond from that relaxed state of mind.
주산 금딜해야지 개가 지가 총가랑 거 렌개가 현을 표사데 소디 총가 렌사데 안지 소디의 등지 산란도 응안지 다들 저게 sub-centeredness somewhere 든지지 다 숙침부 수지여입니다. 다 디기 가르다지 안다지 조디 총가래야사데 총데 가와져오르사나 안등진딩도 조토베르지 가능도 거치 등진딩도 조토베스나다도 수수지 시츄에이션데 간데메데 삼단체 에너지 수수기 subcenteredness 디즈 가르르마 지 시월체제 근데 토하나다 조토야르쇼나 다티 가르르다 지 냉가르디 베지틴르지 만들어서
Lasso?
나서
Lasso? I think the real intention behind the instruction to take defeat upon ourselves and offer victory to others is to bring it all back to the essential point of relating with our own self-centeredness, our own habits of self-centricity, otherwise known as self-fixation. if we examine our minds and discover that in some ways we do have strong habits of self-fixation, then it's precisely those states of mind that we're aiming to pacify or loosen up through our mind training. So if something happens, whatever it may be, if we can take that situation as a cause for pacifying our own self-fixation even a little bit, then I think we will be fulfilling the instruction that is given here to take defeat upon oneself. So I think that we can essentially interpret this instruction to mean that we want our habits of self-fixation to be defeated. That's what we're really trying to defeat.
다들 쇼로가 주바들에 다들 간지죠. 강라다게 팬다. 로아쳐 강시기
신드미릭
신드미릭 체나야. 신년 담바다와 쇼.
The sixth verse of the text says, even if someone in whom I have high expectations from helping them in the past were to senselessly harm me, may I regard them as my genuine teacher.
다 디단 제시다 마신 디 초식네 다 치디 깔라하 지가라 치 고알레아데 깔라하보게 야마나요 이내야 전 담발라죠 왜 니즈토래야 다지 소소 알 팬다샤바 expectation 자와 첨부에도 expectations이다에도 디니지 소소를 제 harm and hurt 들잖아 다디 가서 시스템에 배미지 가르쳐다시 셈을 막았으나 셈을 맞춰버리자 지 셈을 배 가르쳐 동해 첨부지 용도 와
라서
드링이 조사 다 딜이야 가서 지 트레이닝이야 지금 늦지 가르쳐지 로저한테 딘디지 그래요
라서 This is another of those verses that is very easy to understand in terms of its words, but very difficult to practice in terms of its meaning. So the words are very clear, and the principle being illustrated is very clear, but when it comes to our direct experience in our own lives, if someone we had benefited ourselves, and in relation to whom we have great hope and expectation, were to harm or hurt us, that really leaves a wound in our hearts. It leaves a mark in our minds. We suffer a lot when that happens. And so this verse provides us a training to engage in, to prepare our minds for such a situation.
아주 미진알로래야 가두이네 지 expectation 자와당 우유 니수기 드부티니 가두이네 지 퉁야지 깔아하고샤려 참참 자와 잡는 시지 지 우유 니수 돌아야 되는 시지 뭐정어체
맞아.
근데 니수 먹고 차려라 배는 아랑기 미진알로래네 이제 먹고 싶다죠
맞아.
제가 디 example로 그냥 지 쉬비나 지질 팬도 요구를 삼탕도
라서?
아랑기들 동네 그릇이에요.
라서? Generally speaking, it's very difficult to get our hopes and reality to align with one another. There are many times in our lives where what's actually happening is not living up to our hopes, what we hoped would happen. And certainly I have experienced this a lot in my own life. So perhaps if I shared an example from my own life experience, it would be beneficial.
다 그냥 맞아 싱그레 예 되지 히스토리로 지금 맞아 그냥 좀 맞아 싱그레 가시 싱그 유기 말해 다가 별이야 롱바 지 별 샤쇼 롱바 구겨지 개브레 저는 유지 다 구겨게 개브레 중düne 대지게 가르쳐라다지 아 개베 거려야 다的참만 좀 중화에서도 다的참만 중네 다的참만 근데 중대 니 하고 말아
Lare.
다的참만 중네 안디 규제된 대지게 라마 주고도 서머바 다정아 저 배게 다디 다 참만 주는 거지 지 기부 민저하러 지들이 인사바로 지들 거로 든들 이체를 지가 든지 인사바로 챙겨하래 이내 지 까마바 인사바로 베나 수직이 내 파마도 수직이 돼 바지 밀음나라 당뇨 말아
Lasa.
타나 수고반에 지 까마베 연시 제주青年 그룹 촉바 아주 배율이 레듀사네 대뒤에 다들 가서 초전도 수고반에 까마베 대해서 제서 고주기 연시 제주 슝이 레인도 아주 도바사로
Lasa.
도바사다 까마베 임베 도바코라 사두고 맞다
Lasa.
이제 beyond summer다지 다이네 간다레 suddenly 까마바사지 차레 로듀기 겁리야 까마바 레스 차레 디주산다 까마바 레스 쉐두산에 나라 expectation somra hope 르지 아레 까마바 가ring인데 내시랑 고추어 말아 다 까마바 샤베미나 지 제모자 망부 용거레 삼바르지다 지 제모쟁게 trobo 진짜 망부 용거레 삼바르지 대해서 expectation
Lasa.
다드네 파유네야 수고가 레브레 다 수고가 레레 수고가 레두사 다데 수부데 오네트네 시아나다 클라스네 킬로미터 디지트니마도 요마네 이난 거 룸바 구겨지래
Lasa.
랑가드지 야고 요마르 제사 다 로망부진 잠팅팅 데데부 콤바델이야 아나 루르도 다 미망부 용 근데 지도사는 나 당보 지 수고가 연두사네 당보다 모데나는 용어 봐.
Lasa.
다 수고가 말레전텔이야 트디셔널 지 다가는 쉐니 용어래.
Lasa.
다가는 쉐니 연두사네 다지 미상물로기 베징 알다. 아니 지 나동 로모동 제르다.
Lasa.
안다디 지 가르다지 ngandrano dis yungorta ngandrasa samandaji nervous oh dayabu insa mara samsaraji dan it's very serious samarataji dandi benang azu chungjung galya zemod de za soso lama yin dondo che suzuki de chobo de bu chunju de lama yin dondo che zem za ba
Lasa.
ye sam tangbo de de jire sam chengora
Lasa.
다 제일 미망부 용아동 로모동치 오 단디 야부인서 말사 디디 안다 계속
Lasa.
제가 제일 기부시라면도 제가 다디 expectation 데다 안지 의니 주디 과 마디마 직대래시
Lasa. Tening amante dokpa. Dokpa satu biaya.
even we don't have doubt
Lao.
yeah
Lasa.
maybe it's come on about something
Lasa. So I think most of you know the basic details of the history of my life. Perhaps some of you don't. I was born in a very remote and humble area of Tibet. And it is said that when I was born, various auspicious signs and omens were seen. And we Tibetans have a very strong habit of taking this to mean that if there are very clearly evident signs and omens present when a child is born, that must mean that the child is the reincarnation of a previous master, what is known as a chulku in Tibetan. So Tibetans have great trust in this tradition. And so it was generally assumed in my family that I was the reincarnation of some previous master, that I was some form of chulku. But my parents certainly didn't assume or even think that I could possibly be the Karmapa. They hadn't considered that possibility even in their dreams. But nevertheless, one day, a search party from Tsurpu Monastery came to my village searching for the reincarnation of the Karmapa. And we were all greatly shocked by this, but when we were told eventually that I was the reincarnation of the Karmapa, there was no room for us to doubt this.
No.
And in the very early... No?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Not bad? 50%.
Oh, yeah, the 50%, 20%.
Oh.
That's okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay.
Difficult to judge.
So when the reality started setting in that I was going to become, so to speak, the Karmapa, I had various expectations of what it would be like. I thought that I would get even more toys to play with and more friends to play with. But when the reality of the situation set in, it didn't meet my expectations. So, tene payulte kilometer tunjutuni.
No. It's then we came to Tsurpu Monastery.
Lasam.
Tsurpu Monastery is
72 kilometers.
17 kilometers
17.
from Lhasa.
Oh, Lasam.
Okay.
Lasam. Mm-hmm. So then the search party led me to Tsurpu Monastery, which is 72 kilometers from the city of Lhasa. But the roads are very poor. And so the beginning part was done by automobile, but in the end, to accord with tradition, my transportation was provided by horse. So I was riding on horseback into the grounds of Tsurpu Monastery. And that's when I started to get very nervous, because as I was arriving into the grounds of Tsurpu Monastery, they began banging on drums and clanging cymbals together, playing the ceremonial music. And this made me very nervous because it wasn't what I had pictured in terms of what being the Karmapa would be like. When I was little, I would play games with my friends where I would pretend I was the Lama and they would pretend they were the students. And I thought that being the Karmapa would pretty much look like that, like the games that we had played. But when the horns and cymbals and drums started sounding, that's when I became really nervous and started to realize that it wasn't going to be like that at all.
People look me very serious eyes, you know? That's why I'm nervous, I think. And that 가져야지. 로주실 내두산 다 야가네. 가서 변이 야가래 알레브제. 변이 야가래 다 야가데 로주주딘 로 단도 미망부터도 결혼 야가 연거 김zen 가르인 김zen 가르인 바스 티키즈니 마위 온데도 다데 양가르베디 김zen데 야 가두 이네 데코라 gem네 야네 양도 지시에고도 깔라 카브르시도 이나 다 균zen 조디 다배 균zen 시 미참에 삼을도 걸 균zen 배 미세베 배 가르르지기 균zen 지 첨부 시부지 배 상완도 시부지 시아유기를 삼 가두이네 대경아 제용도 이나 다 미세 상완의 균zen 첨부 서버지 배 하래고 알아지게 말아 조디 지 계급 갈이야 용조 지 가수라다 지 랑왕 그 토안에 조교 체쳐 버르지 되지 존나 삼체 라와르 되게 겹체 야래야 용버래 나이네 야갈레 스르산에 배 당보르와 겹는 신지 중요 말에 배나 아주다지 인지 롱버디 아주다지 배발래야 배 지기 오만에 지금 잡아 이해 되지 아주 로망별인 따지 표면 삼에다 인지 사대 버지 지금 미망부치 신거 왔다 아주 오만을 잡아 이해 되지 들지 계급지래 배바당 잡아 숙청부 이해 돼 들지 계급지래 제자다 인지 롱버는 오늘 전다 가수다지 야할레 산 로망부치 조여베 인두산에 따지 인지 롱버 팅카시지 랩 차르 들지 인고요아르디네 다다리 ting tangbo shine ji le tu arab chungbare jezanda degi evidence di karisna be jale ne ji su samban shin ji major ji kala khabu shida mangbu chi chung yin bi chi cha de yare jesa di gunza den expectation shukchen bar shui du san da degi ji uyu ni su do tenan shi majong de en samlia gang ye wa ji mangbu chi yong de
Then, when I was 14 years old, I left Tibet and came to India. And it has been 17 years since I have moved to India. And of course, when I came to India, I had certain expectations of what that would be like. I've been asked again and again and again, why did I leave Tibet? Why did I come to India? And it gets a little tiring of explaining the reasons over and over and over again. It seems that some people think that there's some great shocking secret that is the reason why I left Tibet and came to India. But really, it's not really anything shocking or any type of secret at all. It is that I wanted to travel freely to other countries of the world. That was my main hope in coming to India. But it didn't turn out that way for quite some time. And this very visit to the United Kingdom is a perfect example of that. Many, many Tibetans are aware of the UK. And actually, the Tibetan region and the UK are areas that have a very strong connection with each other. And so I have been hoping for a very long time to be able to visit the United Kingdom. And if things had gone according to my hopes and expectations, this present visit would not be my first visit, but would be one that would have been preceded by several previous visits. But in terms of what has really happened, it's my first visit. So we encounter all kinds of situations in which our hopes and expectations aren't the way things happen in reality. And whenever this happens, it's a challenge for our minds to deal with it.
제상 다딘상 다 expectation 다음에 expectation 채비나 이제 가르쳐다지 expectation yung 신제 다 조조지 소소 전이 가르쳐다지 가제도도지 다지 심진 시안이야지 자와를 장 제외 삼바 다나지 지 펜베 삼바로부터 되지 셈리야 냐르세데 되지 첸다 미세게 신들 라보체사로 지 가서 수수 삼바 능신지기 지기 배 플랜으로부터 배 체시로부터 배 람롱 머중이비냐 조다지 제외 삼바 펜베 삼바로부터 되지 장시 대비이미나 아직 저번에 디토리아 어다지 오늘 전에게 지 심진 다지 지 가사지 나래 저와 단 펜베 삼바 장된게 든지 가사지 예 삼바를 든지 민시안에 아직 라와게야당 지게 뽑아게야로 든지 충분히네 다바지 대점식이 안다지 serve the purpose somewhere 다든지 내 삼바를 제제 다든지 삼다지 되게 제가 디기 다 가져와요 다 디지 다 조디 다다봐도 무투이네 예 콤바디 뉘도 보토야 교제로 조디 다 디지기 셴변 삼바를 장제 대버되기 예 삼바를 드리잖아요
라서
셴변 삼바 잠식
라서
셴 라보치 드리시다가 용음도
라서 These days, I don't have too many expectations. The main way I try to think now is to simply hold to the attitude of wishing to benefit others and hold to the attitude of loving other sentient beings. I think that that is the best way for all of us to do it. Then, even if we're not able to accomplish benefit on a grand scale, according to specific plans that we might have, if we still have this heart and attitude that wishes to help others and that is filled with love for others, then that itself will be enough. For me personally, I feel that it is enough to hold this love for others and wish to be helpful to others. And if the only result that comes from that is a few people in the world knowing there is someone who cares for me, there is someone who wishes me well, then that will be enough. That will fulfill my purpose in life. And that's the attitude that enables me to continue taking steps forward. It's just this simple attitude of wishing to be helpful to others and wanting to share love with others. I feel that that is all that is needed. We don't need to necessarily fulfill grand plans in terms of what some type of vast benefit for others might look like.
Okay. 다들 다 쇼로가 dümbad입니다. 되는 도낭외도 규베 팬데 많은 그런비 되네 그래.
많이 너당동에.
많이 내려 동에 그 상에 달래 렘버쇼스.
Next is verse 7. In sum, whether directly or indirectly, may I offer all benefit and joy to my mothers. When my mothers are harmed or suffer, may I secretly take these harms upon myself.
다디 지지 dümbade 개바다 공다시엔 지금면로
라서?
인고ገብ시엔
라서?
주주시람도와
라서?
인고ገብ이야 왕체외 그 디더 제외 돈을 맞이 쉬는 버지 지금면로 섬 정도
라서? since we're running short on time, I think that the best way would be for us to explore verses 7 and 8 as part of the session of the empowerment this afternoon. So, together with the empowerment, we can also explore verses 7 and 8 of the text.
And during on that day, one day, Papa Jeresi one, the Jeresi day, Gadam be, Tumo Maimbe, Idam Ruchade, Gadam Flashis. La Duzanda Dinanichi, Tumo Maimbe, Idam Ruchade, and Anajil Habardo, Chanjugasem, Joalia, Medumirua, Nijishambore. That Jeresi day, Kashudaji, the Ninja Chanjeruchi. Tiba Chimbe Naloria, Ninja Chanjer, Laruch, Chari Hore. Tadona, Majustan, Sanget Hamjegi, Ninji, Judu Dune, Deji Lion number shot Devade, Papa Jeres, yes. Just water.
This afternoon's empowerment will be the empowerment of Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig. Chenrezig is a special deity in connection with the Kadampa tradition. The Kadampa tradition has 4 special deities that are associated with it in an uncommon way. So Chenrezig is one of these special deities associated with the Kadampa tradition. And more than that, the essential quality for us to train in, the indispensable quality for us to train in if we are to develop bodhicitta, is great compassion. And Chenrezig is a deity that symbolizes great compassion. Chenrezig is considered to be the condensed single embodiment of all of the compassion of all Buddhas, arisen in the form of a deity.